The rain hit Chicago like it had been waiting all week to do it, House, and pressed his forehead against the cold glass and tried to think. Below him, the city was drowning. Streets turned to rivers, headlights bleeding into the wet asphalt. The whole skyline smeared and soft behind the downpour. It was the kind of rain that made the world feel like it was being erased. And tonight, Maxwell thought, maybe it was. 2 floors below him, Victor Crane was dead. He had known Victor for 19 years. They had built this company together from a rented desk and a borrowed phone. They had shaken hands on deals that other men said couldn't be done, survived recessions that buried better-funded rivals, and argued so viciously over the years that their assistants had developed a system of warning knocks to alert each other when the volume reached a certain level. They had been, in every way that mattered, brothers. And now, Victor was dead on his own balcony floor, and Maxwell's fingerprints were on the railing, and the police were already outside. He could see the blue and red lights painting the rain 20 floors below him, blooming and pulsing like something alive.
He had left Victor alive because it was the only solid thing he had. He had walked into Victor's penthouse at 9:30 that evening for a conversation that had been building for weeks, ever since Maxwell found out that Victor had handed documents to federal prosecutors without warning him. Documents that suggested Maxwell had falsified 3 years of earnings reports. The argument had been catastrophic, the kind that strips away every layer of politeness and professionalism and gets down to the raw nerve underneath. They had said things that couldn't be walked back. Victor had stood at the balcony railing shaking with anger, and Maxwell had stood by the door. And for a moment they had looked at each other across 19 years of everything they'd built together. And then Maxwell had walked out at 9:47. He had checked his watch at the elevator. He had nodded at Fernando on the night desk. He had walked out into the rain without an umbrella because he hadn't planned to stay long. Victor was alive when he left. Standing, furious, gripping that railing, but alive. Someone had come after. The police knocked at 10:23. 3 hard slams that didn't ask for permission. Detective Carla Voss didn't believe in coincidences, or rich men, in that order. She had 16 years in homicide and 41 closed cases, and the particular brand of patience that isn't passive at all. It's a coiled, watching patience, the kind that makes the person sitting across from it feel like the walls are slowly moving inward. She cuffed Maxwell in his own living room while her team moved through the apartment, and she walked him out through the lobby and down the marble steps into the blinding chaos of cameras and shouting reporters without saying a word, because she didn't need to say anything. The evidence was already saying everything she needed. Maxwell walked down those steps with his jaw locked and his shoulders back because he was not going to give the cameras what they were waiting for. His eyes swept the crowd out of habit, the old instinct of a man who had spent decades reading rooms and people, and moved past the reporters and the cordon and the sea of upturned faces, and then stopped. Ground floor window, left of the entrance, half hidden by the glare of reflected camera lights.
7 years old, maybe. Small face, dark eyes so large they seemed to be most of her face. She was holding a red crayon, and there was a coloring book on the windowsill, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking directly at Maxwell, with an expression that had no business being on a 7-year-old face. Not fear, not excitement, but something steady and knowing. The expression of someone who has seen a thing and understood it, and is waiting, patiently, for the rest of the world to catch up. A detective's hand shoved Maxwell into the squad car. The door slammed. The window shrank and disappeared into the rain. But those eyes stayed with him all the way to the precinct. The interrogation room was cold and bright, and Voss laid the evidence across the table like a woman playing cards she'd already won. His fingerprints on the railing, his voice on the last call Victor ever received, the security footage of him entering at 9:30, 42 employees who had heard 2 men tearing each other apart through a closed door. And then the motive, which Voss delivered quietly because she didn't need volume. Victor had been 11 days from testifying to the SEC that Maxwell had falsified 3 years of financial records, which meant Maxwell was looking at the destruction of everything he'd spent his life building. And they both knew what kind of men did what kind of things when cornered by that particular variety of destruction. Voss folded her hands and looked at him across the table and said, "Walk me through it." So Maxwell told her, precise, stripped of everything extra. The way you tell the truth when the truth is all you have. The timeline. The argument. The moment he walked out. Fernando at the lobby desk. The rain. He told her that someone else had come after, that there was another presence in that building between 9:47 and the time of death, and that if she looked hard enough, she would find the evidence of it, because it was there. It had to be there. Voss listened without expression. When he finished, she said 4 words. "Do you have a witness?" Maxwell thought of the window, the dark eyes, the red crayon, that steady, knowing face. He thought about what it meant to pull a child into this, the cameras, the pressure, the kind of man who pushes someone off a balcony and then looks down at the witness and smiles. "Not yet," he said quietly. Voss looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up, took her folder, and left him alone in the cold, bright room, with nothing but the hum of the ventilation system and the weight of what he didn't yet have.
3 floors below street level, Lily Reyes was eating cereal at midnight and giving a tiger bright blue stripes. She was 7 years old and small for it, dark-haired, with the kind of enormous, serious eyes that made adults feel vaguely assessed. She operated on a schedule entirely her own, which her father Dario had long since stopped arguing with. She ate when she was hungry and slept when she was tired, and she colored with the focused intensity of someone completing work that mattered, which to Lily it did. Dario came through the door at midnight in his wet janitor's uniform, having read the news on his phone in the elevator and spent 6 floors standing very still trying to understand what he felt about it. He was 35, broad-shouldered, the kind of tired that lives in the bones rather than the eyes. He had come from Oaxaca 13 years ago with almost nothing and had spent every day since building something careful and stable, mostly for the small person currently giving a lion purple ears at his kitchen table. He sat down across from her and kept his voice as level as he had ever kept anything. "Mija, were you at the window tonight?" Lily turned a page, found a giraffe, considered it seriously. "The man with the shiny shoes didn't push him, Papa." The words hit Dario like a hand on a bare wire. "What did you say?" She looked up with those enormous, patient eyes. "The man they put in the police car. He didn't push Mr. Victor." She picked up the green crayon she'd been saving. "The man with the green umbrella did. He came after the shiny shoes man left. I was watching from the window. They were on the balcony, and they were arguing." And then she made a small, almost casual gesture with her hand, the way you'd describe something tipping off a shelf. And then Mr. Victor was gone. And the umbrella man stood there for a second. And then he looked down. Her crayon stopped moving. He looked right at the window, Papa. Right at me. And he smiled. Not a good smile. Like we had a secret now. Dario didn't move. The apartment phone rang. Unknown number on the screen. It rang 4 times in the silence of the kitchen, and then stopped. And the quiet it left behind was worse than the ringing at Ben. Dario was across the kitchen in 3 steps, pulling Lily off her chair and holding her against his chest with both arms, her coloring book pressed between them. She patted his back in the steady way she did when he felt he needed it. This small, unbothered creature who had just described witnessing a murder with less distress than she brought to choosing crayon colors. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the chair outside her bedroom door in the dark and listened to her breathe and thought about green umbrellas and men who looked down at children and smiled. Elena Cross arrived at 6 in the morning, like a woman who had been awake since the murder and considered that a perfectly reasonable use of her time. She was Maxwell's attorney, 39, precise and relentless, with the kind of focused energy that came from spending her whole career being underestimated and deciding somewhere along the way to make that everyone else's problem. Dario opened the door with the chain on and looked at her through the gap with the eyes of a man who had decided overnight that he trusted no one. Elena didn't waste time. She told him about the phone call, traced to a burner, purchased 2 blocks from the building, made 90 minutes after the murder. She told him what that meant without making him say it first. The man on that balcony already knew there was a witness in the ground floor window, and he was not the kind of person who left that kind of thing unresolved. The chain came off. Lily was at the table, same chair, different coloring book, different cereal. She looked at Elena with calm assessment and waited. Elena crouched to her level. She said her name. She said she was trying to find the man with the green umbrella. She asked if Lily could help. Without a word,
Lily reached under the table. She kept important things under the table. Dario had noticed this for years, and produced a folded piece of paper and slid it across the surface with one small hand. Elena opened it. It was a crayon drawing, bold lines, Lily's style, the proportions slightly off in the particular way that made her work immediately recognizable. But the detail was extraordinary. A tall figure in a dark coat, the green umbrella held at the precise angle of someone standing on a high balcony looking down, and on the lapel of the coat, drawn with a care that suggested Lily had stared at it long enough to memorize it, a small symbol. 2 hourglasses, side by side, a distinctive, unmistakable shape.
She knew that logo. Anyone who had spent 20 minutes in Chicago's financial world knew that logo. It belonged to Brendan Vail, 60 years old, silver-haired, a man whose face appeared on the covers of business magazines with the regularity of someone who employed people specifically to make sure that happened. He sat on the boards of 3 hospitals. He had a concert hall named after him. He had given a TED Talk about the ethics of wealth that 11 million people had watched and found deeply moving. He was Victor Crane's business partner of 30 years. And he had been on television the previous evening, voice cracking, calling Maxwell Hargrove a cold-blooded killer. Alina sat very still for a moment. The kitchen clock ticked. Lily ate a spoonful of cereal. "Can I keep this?" "I made 2," Lily said, "in case one got lost." Alina looked at this child, 7 years old, cereal spoon in hand. Completely matter-of-fact about the fact that she had just handed a murder investigation its entire second act, and felt something she didn't feel very often.
The next 72 hours moved the way crises do, too fast and too slow at the same time. Everything happening at once, and nothing happening fast enough. Elena's team worked around the clock. They pulled Vail's movements for the night of the murder and found a private dinner in River North with 11 guests, none of whom could confirm he was present for the full evening. The restaurant had a rear exit onto an alley. The alley connected to a street 2 blocks from Hargrove Tower. The green umbrella was traced to a boutique on Michigan Avenue, fewer than 200 made annually, purchased 6 months earlier on a corporate card tied to one of Vail's subsidiary companies. And the building's CCTV footage, cleaned up and examined frame by frame, showed a figure entering the service elevator at 9:51 p.m., 4 minutes after Maxwell left, in a dark coat, carrying a green umbrella with a distinctive custom handle. The same figure re-entered the elevator at 10:03. Victor Crane's estimated time of death sat squarely inside that 12-minute window, like a stone dropped into still water.
Vail's assistant, a woman named Patricia Ogden, who had worked for him for 11 years, walked into the prosecutor's office on the 4th day with her own attorney and the expression of someone who had been carrying something unbearable for too long and had finally run out of the strength to keep carrying it. She sat down and she talked for 3 hours. She told them she had known Vail was at Hargrove Tower that night. He had told her to clear his calendar from 9 p.m. onward. She had seen him return to his own building at 10:20, still carrying the green umbrella. She had seen his face, and she had not been able to look at it directly. She had read the news the next morning and sat at her desk for 4 hours without moving, and then called her lawyer. And then she told them the thing that changed everything. Victor Crane had been about to change his testimony to the SEC, not to hurt Maxwell, but to clear him. In the weeks before his death, Victor had discovered that the financial irregularities at the center of the investigation had not originated with Maxwell at all. They had been engineered by Vail, buried inside a series of transactions structured with deliberate precision to make Maxwell's signature appear on the surface, while Vail's name disappeared entirely into the architecture beneath it. Victor had confronted Maxwell that night not out of betrayal, but out of guilt, trying to tell him what he'd found, and their argument had been the argument of 2 men who had both been played by the same hand and were only just beginning to understand it. Vail had known Victor was going to recant, had known what the recantation would uncover, and he had put on a dark coat and picked up a green umbrella and taken the service elevator to the 45th floor and made sure that Victor Crane never said another word to anyone. The only thing he hadn't accounted for was a 7-year-old girl in red rain boots who liked to sit at windows at night and color tigers blue. The courtroom on the day Lily testified was so quiet you could hear the rain against the high windows. She came in holding her father's hand, wearing her red boots that squeaked on the marble floor, and made a few people in the gallery smile despite the gravity of everything. She sat in the witness stand with her feet dangling 6 inches above the floor, and she looked at the attorney questioning her with the clear, direct attention of someone who had decided to take this seriously and expected the same in return. Elena walked her through it carefully. What had she seen from the window? What time did she think it was? What did the man look like? What did you notice about his coat? Lily answered everything in her steady, unhurried voice. She didn't perform, didn't dramatize, didn't do anything except describe what she had seen with the same calm precision she brought to her drawings. This is what was there. This is what it looked like. This is what happened. She described Victor on the balcony, the 2 figures arguing in the rain, the moment that changed everything, and then the umbrella man standing alone at the railing and looking down.
Then the prosecutor said, "So you could be mistaken about what you saw." And the courtroom was so quiet that her voice, when it came, seemed to reach every corner of it without effort. "I know the difference between someone falling and someone said, 'Nothing further,' and sat down. In the distance with the controlled frayed. And then, slowly, as if she was already looking at him. Steady, knowing expression she had, unafraid, and is simply waiting for everyone else to catch up." Brendan Vale looked away first. It came back in 4 hours. Not guilty, something he'd been holding so tightly that releasing it left a shape behind. He sat at the defense table with both hands flat on the courthouse steps in the same rain that had been falling the night Victor died, under the same cameras, down the same marble steps. Maxwell stood at the top and watched it happen, and felt not triumph, but something quieter and more complicated. The grief of a friendship that had already been over before he knew it was ending, and the strange, sad relief of a truth that had finally, after everything, found its way to the surface.
Dario took Lily for waffles after. They found a booth with red vinyl seats in a diner 3 blocks from the courthouse, and Lily ordered waffles with extra syrup and ate them with the satisfied focus of someone who had completed something important. Dario drank 2 cups of coffee and watched his daughter and thought about everything he wanted to say and couldn't find the beginning of. "You were brave up there," he said finally, "on that stand, in front of all those people." Lily chewed, considered the statement with her usual seriousness. "I wasn't brave," she said. "I just said what I saw. That's not brave. That's just true." He ordered more coffee. Window, Chicago went on being Chicago, loud and fast and indifferent to the small, extraordinary things happening inside its buildings and its courtrooms and its ground floor windows. Lily drew on her napkin a little figure in a dark coat, a green umbrella, and in the window of a tall building, very small but deliberate, a little face looking out. She makes the whole city look like it was just... In the ground floor window of Hargrove Tower, the light was off. The coloring book, uncounted, couldn't be unseen, couldn't be smiled away by a man with a green umbrella and the certainty